Hello and thanks for listening to Loqpod. My name's Katie Ringsdore. Today I'm joined by Tanyella Evans. She's the CEO of a non-profit company called NABU. They're on a mission to end illiteracy by 2030. Thank you very much for joining me on Loqpod. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on, Tanyella. Would you mind just giving us a bit of an introduction to who you are and what you do at NABU?
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie, for having me as well. I'm just so excited to be here and share a little bit about our work at NABU. So my name's Tanyella. I'm the CEO and co-creator of NABU. I started the organization about 9 years ago now. It's been an amazing journey. And it really started for me. I was working in Haiti in 2010 after the earthquake. And I was working there on a project to build a school for children. We laid the foundations of the school for 900 children. And I remember the day that we took enrollment for the school, and over 3,000 children showed up for school. And it was a really low point, to be honest, because it was so hard to turn away over 2,000 children who we just knew we didn't have the space for. And I remember when I got home that evening to the guest house where I was staying, we had this wonderful woman, Jane, who used to look after everyone in the guest house. And I was chatting to her and I saw that she had her phone plugged in the kitchen and she was on Facebook. And this was 2010. And, it wasn't like lightning struck at that moment and NABU was born. It was a much longer process of conversations with my co-creators as well. But it did become clear to me at that moment that cell phones are everywhere in Haiti. And there were telecommunications companies battling it out for the market. And over time, the idea emerged for NABU, which is, how could we build like the equivalent of Amazon, which at the time was mainly a book publisher, if you remember. But
I do, yeah.
But build like an Amazon app or a Kindle app, but a free version, focused solely on children's books, educational, early readers. So a free Amazon library for the developing world. And that is really how NABU was born. Our mission is quite simply to solve the global literacy crisis. 215 million children that are not learning the basics of how to read. And that is even after 4 years at school for some of those children, due to lack of access to books and reading materials in languages that they speak and understand. And so that's kind of how NABU was born. And what I do every day is just helping drive our team towards that mission of a world where every child can read and rise to their full potential.
And what a fantastic mission it is. I mean, that stat you've just given me there of 250 million children basically leaving school unable to read. I mean, how are you able to kind of spread the work that you're doing? Because I know you do a lot of work around Rwanda and Cambodia, and like you say, Haiti. Where do you do your work and how do you identify the key areas that need your assistance?
Yeah, so, we have really followed the need. And I think that's critical, with any business or organization, you want to just see where that need is and follow that. So we started actually after Haiti in the program there, we did a small pilot as well in Cambodia in 2015, 2016. So essentially what we did is we built this low bandwidth reading app and we filled it with some stories. In Cambodia, the mother tongue language is Khmer. So we had some Khmer books and some English books. And this was in 2015, 2016. And what was crazy is that after 10 weeks of our pilot, the kids had just read through all of the Khmer books, all of them, the books in their mother tongue language, and yet they had barely touched the English books. So I got to see, firsthand that if books were in mother tongue languages, kids were going to read them. And so, we started in Cambodia, but it really just grew from there. We started in Haiti, Cambodia. We did a couple of other pilots. But I think, the default is to think, okay, there's not access to books in languages that children need. The default's maybe to think, let's go and translate our books. But we wanted to take a different approach. We wanted to work with local authors and local illustrators to create content. And what we started to see was that, kids were seeing themselves in the story for the first time. And it just really elevated their own personal sense of standing in the world. And so we just continued to grow from Haiti. We moved then to Rwanda. And I remember in our program in Rwanda, I guess it was maybe about 2018, I met Belize, and at the time she was about 8 years old, and she was reading on NABU actually at a local community center where the children would gather to read together. And she told us that before NABU, she was really shy to get up in front of the class and her parents because she wasn't confident reading in English. But when I was there, she actually got up and shared her favorite story. She read in front of all of the children and the parents there. And it's a story about a cheeky rabbit that's always tricking the local villagers. And it just makes her laugh, and she loves it. And this is what Navi is really about. It's about enabling children like Belize not only to gain literacy, but to feel valued and seen and able to share their stories, ideas, and emotions fearlessly. And this love of reading amongst our users, like amongst the readers on NABU, comes from the fact that the books are written by local authors and illustrators who, they're not only writing in their mother tongue language, but also the stories reflect their lived experiences. And so in the last 12 months, we've gone from 100,000 reader sign-ups to over 1 million sign-ups on the NABU app across Haiti, Rwanda, Kenya. We're now extending into the Philippines, into Romania. So our model is really being validated. This demand for children's books in mother tongue languages is there. And so it's spreading through that demand and through us just following that and finding great partners to help us spread and expand.
That's amazing. And like you say, the appetite's clearly there for this. And literacy is something that most of us in the developed world just take for granted. And we don't realise, those that haven't had the access to education and the ability to read, the impact it has on self-esteem and confidence as well. Just exactly your point, your story you shared there about the 8-year-old, that's just, it makes it very real for me when you hear stories like that about the actual impact this is having on people's lives. Tanyella, how do you fund the work you do? Because obviously, this can't be particularly cheap, travelling around the world and helping people. How do you raise the money to do this?
Yeah, so I guess like any startup at the very beginning, we thought, well, what's the quickest way to raise the money? And we actually did a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter. We raised $100,000, which even now it's a lot, but at the time was an insane amount of money. I'd never raised more than, a few $100s before that for charities that I cared about. It was absolutely terrifying. But, I think doing something like that publicly, that was really powerful in the beginning because, again, it was another validation point that if we were to build this platform that people wanted to get behind us and support the idea and fund the idea. And then from there, I have a background in nonprofit. So I was definitely early in my career, but I'm good at writing. And so we started out with a grants program, and that's been really successful for us. So we won the Echoing Green Fellowship, Knight Foundation, some of these big foundations that again get behind early stage ideas and fund social entrepreneurs that that have an idea that can change the world. And so I'm really grateful for those early funders. And then more recently, we have an incredible board of directors that help to fund our work. And then corporate sponsorship. This is the first year where HP has come on board as a corporate sponsor. And that's made such a difference to our work because, they're aligning their company around social impact as well. And I think that's something that we're seeing in the space is that, corporations and others are realizing that giving to a nonprofit like NABU, yes, it's about a donation, it's about doing good, but, it's also about good business. It's about creating value for the world. A literate population in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, that's our future workforce, that's future consumers. And I know that's critical to your work as well, is thinking about how to, create new financial systems and new opportunities. And so for businesses that are thinking about that, how do we start now to equip children with the tools that they need? I think about financial literacy and what you do at Loqpod. And I think, at the end of the day, it's about freedom, right? And also opportunity. Like Loqpod helps people learn how to save and manage their money so they can be unburdened by debt and have greater freedom and opportunity down the line. And, if I think about that as well, it's also about being able to take advantage of opportunities in the world, not be limited or controlled by others. Like when you're in control of your finances, you're more open, or when you're not in control of your finances, I should say, you're more open to exploitation.
That's right.
And, literacy is the same. Like children who are illiterate, it's one of the key factors go on to be adults who are illiterate, extremely vulnerable to social and economic exploitation, whether that's sexual exploitation or, forced labor. So literacy, like financial control, that opens up freedoms, liberties, gives individual agency. If you know how to read, you're much less likely to be exploited. So I think literacy, like financial control, is a tool and a foundation that anyone needs to be able to operate independently and freely. And so at NABU, we find funders that believe in that vision. Really it's about, ending poverty, disrupting that cycle of poverty through giving people agency and freedom and opportunity through literacy. And so we're so fortunate to have amazing individual supporters as well as foundations and corporations that enable us to do the work that we do. But it's been hard. It hasn't been an easy journey,
No, I can imagine. Yeah. And actually, on financial literacy, you make a really good point there, Tanyella, and it's something that, you're preaching to the converted here, because it's something that I'm very passionate about, because, a frustration of mine, being brought up in the UK is, nobody taught me how to fill in a tax return. And that's a first world problem. Mm. So if you think about, the work you're doing, on literacy in general, but then expanding it even further to giving children and young women and men access to the information they need to be able to, become financially included and understand the impact that, finances have on their wider lifestyle in general. Like you say, we can do more to prevent poverty and homelessness. There's a huge amount that needs to be done in this area. Is this something that's kind of in your pipeline to develop as part of your kind of strategy for the future?
Yeah, it would be amazing to do that. We have started to build out kind of thematic collections at NABU. So we have a program called the Authentic Book Creation Lab, or the ABC Lab, where we hire local authors and illustrators in the community. And we pay them while they train to create world-class, culturally relevant mother tongue books for children and families in their community. And so one of the ideas we have is to create a collection around financial literacy. We've done similar things around gender empowerment, around the environment, And it's been just incredible. We worked with Girl Rising on an incredible collection, starting with one book called Go Stella Go, which was about a girl who wanted to become an engineer, and it just followed her journey and the obstacles she had to overcome. And so I think, there's a great opportunity through children's stories to really combat whether it's stereotypes or stigma or fear that are very culturally nuanced. And doing it through children's books not only reaches children, but also the parents and the family and the wider community. Because when children get excited about the book, they want to share it. So yeah, that's something that we're really looking at, is how to build in these important themes, including financial literacy, into our early grade reading collections. So children
Love it.
grow up,
That's excellent. That's
yeah,
really,
seeing
really cool.
themselves.
It's like the opportunities are just endless for the work you do. But obviously, like you said, you need the corporate sponsorship, you need the funding, you need the support, and also you need the authors. And I think you told me something when we chatted before we did the recording for this podcast. You were telling me about a training program that you helped put some of the local authors and illustrators on. I thought that was really fascinating. Would you mind sharing a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we currently have a campaign called Sponsor an Artist, which is going to help us create children's books in underserved languages. So it enables anyone, could be someone listening to this podcast, to fund a local author or artist in a community, and it enables us to pay them while they train. And we have an incredible creative director who trains them in world-class, culturally relevant book creation. And we train these artists in our ABC lab. And basically, we work together for a year to create a complete early grade reading collection of 160 books in their language. So that kind of covers kindergarten, or I guess preschool through P3. And then when we publish those 160 books, we make them available completely for free on the NABU reading app. And after the program, our artists have gone on to get great jobs in digital art, publishing, other design fields. For example, Kate, who's a writer who recently joined our team, she's written some absolutely incredible stories in Swahili for us, which is a mother tongue language spoken in East and Central Africa by about 150 million people, and yet there are virtually zero children's books in this language. So she told us that she's just really motivated and excited by seeing her nieces and nephews reading her stories on the NABU app and getting excited for the next ones. So it's such a cool campaign. It's so easy to join. When you sponsor a local artist, you get updates on their journey, see how their skills are improving, and of course get a copy of one of their completed books. So it's a pretty cool program.
It really is. And I'll put the links to your website into the body of the podcast here. So if anybody's listening now and you'd like to get involved, I'll put the links in there so you can click through and understand a little bit more about that, because I think it's a wonderful campaign. I really do. It's superb. Well, all the work you're doing is fabulous. Tanyella, you mentioned there that obviously NABU is an app-based free book system. How does that work for areas that don't have access to the internet?
Yeah, that's a great question. The really cool thing is that smartphone penetration across sub-Saharan Africa, for example, which is one of our key markets, is now over 50%. So that's over 400 million people in our target market. So that's a pretty big addressable market right there. What we're seeing is that the cost of smartphones is falling. You can get an Android smartphone, for example, in Rwanda for $30. And so this is starting to become a really core part of people's lives. It's becoming indispensable to have a mobile phone and increasingly smartphones. But we do partner with other organizations, with the UN, with many nonprofits around the world to also provide our books in print, where digital is just not accessible. So, for example, with the Afghan crisis, 20,000 of our books were printed by the US State Department and distributed to Afghan refugees all around the world. So we definitely do recognize that, digital is growing, it's the future, but, our vision is really to grow access over the next 3 years. So our vision is to reach 25 million readers, children by 2025. So we're planning to do that, just break it down one by one, family by family, language by language. And even just with our top 4 language groups, those languages are spoken by over 500 million people. So languages like Swahili, Tagalog, Tamil, Hausa, these are languages that, have huge numbers of speakers and yet very few children's books available. So even if we just do that and publish it on our app, we hope to be part of, a global movement that's looking to eradicate poverty within our lifetime.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. And I suppose, for you, you've dedicated at least the last 10 years of your life to this. I mean, when you see and hear the success stories from real people and seeing how you've changed the lives of goodness knows how many people, I mean, how does that make you feel? And what are some of the stories that you've heard from people?
Yeah, it makes me feel amazing. I mean, it's really such an honor to get to do this work every day. And, one of the things that really touches me is just seeing parents with their children connecting through that love of books. Because many of the parents in the countries that we work don't necessarily speak English or French or the languages that their children are learning at school. So, for example, I have a little boy in our program called Olivier, and I just love, seeing them and seeing that what his mum Bridget shared with me is that, for the first time she can also be involved with Olivier and in his reading, and she can understand as he's reading to her. And she can see that, he's doing so well in class. And, having that connection between parents and children, we often think that technology can alienate, but it has huge power to bring people together as well if used well. So I really believe in the power of technology. I believe it can help us, leapfrog, especially in developing countries. It can help us leapfrog into the future and create greater equity for communities if we just think about, the tools that people need, and how they're culturally relevant and accessible. So, I love to see how technology can bring people together.
The possibilities are endless, aren't they? But Tanyella, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Loqpod today. It's been wonderful to hear more about the work you've been doing at NABU, and I'd love you to keep in touch and keep us up to date with some more of your great stories, because I think it's wonderful the work you're doing. But thank you again for joining me today.
Thank you, Katie. Great talking to you.